లైట్ కనపడుతుంది, లైట్ కనిపిస్తుంది.
Good morning to all.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Morning to everyone. Namaskaram.
Namaste, sir. I'm sure. Yeah, all of us are there. Sir. Yeah, good morning, sir. Good morning, everybody. Varshitha.
Yes.
Varshitha.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning to all the dignitaries and the participants who have joined us for the program. I, Varshitha, student from VNR Vignana Jyoti Institute of Engineering and Technology, take immense pleasure to welcome you all to this National Symposium on the Corona Crisis, the road ahead for human societies and nations. I'm sure that all of you are aware that the two-day symposium is going to deliberate many discussions and ideas from varied disciplines and perspectives on the theme, and also that the discussions brought in this forum would have a wider impact on societies and nations ahead. The resource persons would give their take on the theme, and then we would initiate the question and answer session from the audience. Participants can post their questions in the chat box for the resource persons to address them one after the other. I now take the pleasure to introduce our organizing team. May I now introduce Dr. B. Chennakeshwara Rao Garu, Director, VNR Vignana Jyoti Institute of Engineering and Technology. Dr. B. Chennakeshwara Rao Garu Dr. B. Chennakeshwara Rao Garu, the director of VNR Vignana Jyoti Institute of Engineering and Technology, is an able administrator. He obtained his BE in Mechanical Engineering from CBIT, ME in Production Engineering from Osmania University, PhD from Osmania University. Dr. B. Chennakeshwara Rao Garu conducted more than 300 workshops, conferences, seminars, etc. during the last decade. He conducted various entrance examinations such as MSET, ESET, ISET, GATE, JEE, CAT, and other competitive examinations more effectively. His academic activities include execution of AICTE TAPTEC project on machinability of metal matrix composite worth about 6 lakhs rupees, published many technical papers in Journal of Repute, guided 10 PG projects and 60 UG projects. He was a member of Academic Senate and Faculty of Engineering, Osmania University since August 2006, expert panel member of TSCII Skill Development and AMP, education expert panel member of Pratidwanu. He was formerly associated with CBIT Hyderabad. He strived to take CBIT to a better place among its contemporaries. He is a lifetime member of ISTE and ISME. Yuva Kalavahini Vundela Kalapeetham conferred him Best Professional Award on 23rd August 2015. May I now introduce Dr. T. Vijayakumar Garu, Director HLF. Dr. T. Vijayakumar Garu, former professor of English and Dean Faculty of Arts, Osmania University, Hyderabad. His publications include Critical Studies, English and Perspectives, Focus India, Post-Colonial Narratives of the Nation, and translations, The Liberation of Sita by Volga and Kanya Shulkam, an early 20th century Telugu classic by Gurujada Venkata Apparao. He is a TEDx speaker, director of the annual Hyderabad Literary Festival, and one of the founder editors of Muse India, the literary e-journal. May I now introduce Dr. Matthew George Garu, Principal, St. Mary's College. Professor J. Matthew George Garu joined the St. Mary's College as principal in 2016. Prior to joining St. Mary's College, he was an associate professor at IBS Hyderabad and headed the Center for Entrepreneurship Development of the ICFAI deemed University, Hyderabad. An economist by training, he is an alumnus of University of Hyderabad and Madras Christian College. He is also an alumnus of the International Visitor Leadership Program IVLP and has visited some of the top universities in the US, including MIT and Harvard, Langston, University of California at San Diego, and New York State University. He is passionate about teacher training and keeps a track of the latest developments in education, technology. Professor Matthew is also a very popular speaker on topics related to leadership, communication, startups, public policy, and higher education, and is regularly invited to speak at conferences, management development programs, and faculty development programs organized by many prestigious institutions and organizations. He has also been a mentor to some of the startups in Hyderabad and in Bangalore. His areas of academic interest are spread over education, economics, and entrepreneurship. May I now introduce Dr. Jayashree Garu, Head HNDS VNR Vignana Jyoti Institute of Engineering and Technology. Professor Jayashree Garu has more than 3 decades of teaching experience in the field of mathematics. She holds a PhD in automated reasoning from University of Hyderabad. Her research interests include pattern recognition, feature extraction, and automated reasoning. She has a number of articles presented and published in various international and national journals. She is well known for her amicable approach and thus plays a vital role in mentoring and grooming learners. Under her leadership and guidance, the HNS department has achieved several milestones. She also spearheads the Center for Education and Technology, which encourages the faculty in constantly upgrading their knowledge base through seminars, FDPs, and workshops. Thank you, ma'am, for encouraging us to host this webinar. Now, I'm pleased and honored to invite our beloved Dr. D.N. Rao Garu, who is an impeccable personality with great leadership qualities, yet a down-to-earth person. Every student and member of VNR VJIET family looks up to him with awe and considers him an visionary and inspirational genius. Now I invite the convener of today's event, Dr. D. Sudharani Garu, Associate Professor, VNR Vignana Jyoti Institution of Engineering and Technology, to give her introductory remarks.
On the outset, let me really welcome all the panelists and a very good morning to all the members who joined. The August gathering includes respected Dr. N. Rao Garu, President Vignana Jyoti, Dr. Chennakeshwar Rao Garu, Director Vignana Jyoti, Dr. Matthew George Garu, Principal St. Mary's College, Dr. Vijay Kumar Garu, Director HLF, Dr. Varaprasad Reddy Garu, Dr. M.V. Rangarao Garu, all of them. Good morning, all of you, sir. It's indeed a pleasure for all of us here from VNR Vignan Jyoti who believe in the journey called We Are for Happy and Sustainable Society. And thank you all for joining in our movement called We Are for Happy and Sustainable Societies. When we first heard of Corona in January 2020, we were certainly not aware of what was in store for us. Now in the month of August 2020, after 8 months, we are still not aware of what is in store for us. This great uncertainty, certainly very unpleasant uncertainty, is here. This is more like a wartime and demands urgent attention of individual human beings, societies, and nation states to rise to the occasion and respond positively. Every individual human being should understand the situation and prepare for the aftermath of this pandemic in case if this pandemic is ready to leave us, which probably will be more dangerous. The role of scholars from humanities and social sciences becomes vital because the concern is humanity, and the only race which is going to be hit is the human race. In our pursuit of happy and sustainable societies, we at VNR VJIET found the necessity of a conclave of scholars from humanities and social sciences disciplines, since the very task of awakening the human societies towards the cause is a teamwork. We began it by collaborating with the well-known brands of Hyderabad Literary Festival, and St. Mary's College. Hope this symposium achieves the objectives of creating a vision and mission, a viable strategy, a sense of direction, and an action plan for individual human beings, human societies, and nation states to tackle this war-like situation. Thank you all. Over to Varshitha.
Thank you, ma'am. I now welcome Dr. B. Chennakeshwar Rao Garu, Director, VNR Vignana Jyoti, to give his note on the theme.
Good morning to all of you. respected Dr. D.N. Rao Garu, President Vignan Jyoti, Varaprasad Reddy Garu, and other dignitaries on the board and dear participants. So on behalf of VNR VJIET, I once again extend warm welcome to all of you for this national level multidisciplinary symposium of intellectuals, that is Corona crisis, the road ahead. Actually, in this connection, I request all the intellectuals, so please discuss what are the problems that the society is facing as on today, how to overcome this pandemic crisis. So all these things, I think today and tomorrow we are going to discuss across various panels. So in this connection, I request all the panelists, so please try to look into the people perspective, especially the society is looking, especially at this moment, they're all looking for optimal quality solutions. So that way, I think at this moment, we have to give the support to the public and see that at the end of the day, definitely this all the people should be happy in this earth. So in this connection, our D.N. Rao Garu is, I think, going to explain about what are the things that we are doing at VNR VJIET. From the beginning, I think Dr. D.N. Rao Garu, he used to ask us to prepare restart manual. So in that, I think what are the precautions we're supposed to take before opening the campuses. I think this pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic, I think has created a trouble to all of us actually, because students, they're not there in the campus since March 16th. I think we're all struggling a lot to handle the classes through various platforms. And finally, I think even though we have completed successfully the syllabus, etc., during the last academic year, but still we are unable to conduct examinations as on today, because each and every student, unless you conduct examinations, I think they'll not prepared. As for the VNR VJIET is concerned, we're all ready to conduct even online examinations also. And with regarding the next academic year, I think we are all eagerly waiting for to start the next academic year. I think as on today, so even unlock 3 also, if we can look into that one, actually, education sector is, I think it is the least important sector when compared to all other sectors. That's why I think nobody is touching the educational institutions. And I think most likely we are going to plan to conduct online classes from 17th of August. And for that, we are going to prepare all the things that are required, especially dealing with the students, especially in VNR VJIET, nearly we have 6,500 students on the campus. And we have nearly 667 faculty and the staff, all put together nearly around 7,000 plus public that are going to be enter into the campus. So if you want to handle, so I think what are the precautions that we're supposed to take, all the precautions that are required as per the guidelines given by MHRD, UGC, AICT and JNTU, we are all, I think, strictly following. And especially, I think today we're all worrying about how to conduct classes and how to evaluate the students without losing even one academic year. So that is our concern actually. But with regarding the VNR VJIET is concerned, this year I think we are going to celebrate Silver Jubilee year, because we have completed 25 years of its journey successfully under the able leadership of D.N. Rao Garu, Varshitha Muddasani Garu, all members of Vignan Jyoti. And so in this connection, I request Jayasri Madam and as well as the Sudharani Madam. So please try to see that how effectively we are going to discuss about the various things that we are doing at VNR VJIET. And I think D.N. Rao Garu is going to explain more detail about what are the things that we are doing at VNR VJIET. And the same help, I think we want to extend to the public also. I think care and share, especially this is the word of kind by our D.N. Rao Garu. So in this connection, each one of us, I think we are all well-educated people. So, but the society, I think they are looking for quality solutions. And at this moment, I think everybody is talking about what are the precautions that we are supposed to take. That is, one is a social distance. That is not a physical distance. At least we have to maintain 6 feet gap whenever we are moving. And the second one is wearing the mask anytime, everywhere. And the third one is hand wash with the help of liquid soap or sanitizing the hands. So these are the three principles I think each one of us we have to follow when we are there in the campus. But in addition to that, I think we have started a Ayush Center at VNR VJIET. I think that DN Ragari is going to explain more about what are the things that we have implemented at VNR VJIET in connection with that is coronavirus, to prevent the coronavirus. Okay, thank you. I once again thank all the panelists for accepting our invitation and taking part in these deliberations. And I also thank Jayashree Madam and Sudharani Madam for organizing this two-day symposium. In this connection, once again, I congratulate all of you and compliment each one of you, whoever is involved in this conference. Thank you once again. I wish you all good luck. All the best.
Thank you, sir. I now welcome Dr. T. Vijay Kumar Garu, Director HLF, to give his note on the theme.
Good morning, everyone. It's indeed a welcome move by the VNR VJIET to think of not just organize, but even think of organizing a symposium like this, a colloquium like this, especially because VNR VJIET happens to be a engineering and technology college, and we are all familiar with what role the social sciences and humanities play in a technology institution. And therefore, it's even more welcome that a well-known technology institution like VNR VJIET is organizing this particular symposium. I think it's very important now to realize, I think one of the things that the coronavirus has made us realize is the relationship, if I can say that, between different domains of knowledge. We all, I think for the last 20-25 years, almost everywhere in our country, and particularly in the two Telugu states, and by and large in the entire South India, our entire education system is a bit skewed because we are focusing largely on technology and to some extent on science. And for various reasons, the study of social sciences and humanities has been neglected. And history shows us what social price that society has to pay when we ignore social sciences and humanities. The case of Japan, etc., are before us. This is not to say that science and technology is not important. Of course, it is important. And science and technology, scientists and technologists, if we just take the present crisis, the pandemic, as an example, we know that the immediate solution to the pandemic lies with the scientists and the technology people. But at the same time, while the scientists and the technologists work in the labs, the social sciences and in the humanities, scholars in the humanities, for them, the society is the lab, and that is where they work. And while the science and technology may be able to give us a solution to the present crisis, for an understanding of the crisis, we have to depend on social sciences and humanities. So there is, on the one hand, science may give us a solution, but for an understanding, we need the social sciences and humanities. One may think, I think, the sooner we synergize these two disciplines, or all disciplines for that matter, the better for us as a society. One may think that this is very simple, but it's not very simple to implement, very not easy to implement. I'll just give you one example and stop there. Recently, for example, the government of India started the process of consultations to formulate the Department of Science and Technology, DST. They initiated a consultation process to formulate the Science Technology Innovation Plan 2020, what is called STIP 2020. Of course, towards a science policy, which was last formulated in 2013. So in 7 years, they are planning to revise this science and technology plan. They have formed 4 different verticals, and then they are working on it. Among, in one of the verticals, for example, so far, if I remember right, about 16 panels were formed, and several meetings have taken place. And these 16 panels consisted of people from scientists, well-known scientists, administrators, journalists, institutional heads, and so on and so forth. But one glaring omission is that there was not a single social scientist in any of these 16 panel meetings that has taken place. There was no sociologist, forget about a philosopher, or even a historian, for example. And this is to show that we consider science and technology, as if it exists in a vacuum. And science and technology is something that is very much related to everyone's life. Whether you are a ordinary citizen, or whether you are a philosopher, or everybody is impacted by science and technology. And to completely bypass and ignore, I think the impact of science on society is something that has led, I think, to where we are today. That we and this is it's not as if this does not happen. Just to take one example, for example, take the case of Germany, where the science policy is formulated after wide-ranging discussions, and everyone, including an ordinary citizen, participates actively in the formulation of a science policy. Because after all, whether we are direct participants or not, every one of us is impacted by science and technology. And therefore, I'll just end by saying, closer home, take the example of Kerala, which is considered to be a success story in dealing with the pandemic. And the success of science, for example, or medicine in Kerala is actually dependent on social participation and political decentralization. So science, I think, succeeds only when the society is ready for it. And so the sooner we take the social aspect of science and technology into consideration, it is for the success of science itself that an understanding of social sciences and humanities becomes very important. And therefore, I feel that a technology college like VJIET taking this initiative augurs very well. And hopefully, for example, the new education policy that has just come out maybe gives us some hope that finally, at least, we have recognized the need to synergize the various disciplines of knowledge. I look forward to listening to different panelists. And once again, thank you very much for inviting me as an individual and our organization, the Hyderabad Literary Festival, to be a part of this symposium. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I now welcome Dr. Matthew George Garu, Principal, St. Mary's College, to give his note on the theme.
esteemed scholars and accomplished educationists present here, distinguished members of the first panel and in the audience, organizers of the event, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is an absolute honor for me to be here, to be part of this national symposium, the climate crisis, the road ahead for human societies and nations. St. Mary's College, the institution I represent, is associated with the event, and I'm quite proud of the association. The symposium is about the elephant in the room, rather the one out there. You can't ignore it, and it is quite big. Yet, as I see it, we still don't see the elephant fully. What we know is still evolving, and I think it was a brilliant idea to make sense of this evolving phenomena from the perspective of various disciplines in humanities and social sciences. I'm fairly confident that at the end of the two-day symposium, even if we would still be touching upon only the surface and feeling it around, and well, the elephant may still continue to emerge bigger, but we will be less blind, at least to the other perspectives and voices. I couldn't have put the case for social sciences in this debate half as well as Professor Vijay Kumar did, and in any case, I get to share my thoughts again in the afternoon, so I will not speak much. I was looking at the panel and I could see that economics was sandwiched between history and political science, which I thought was quite appropriate. Although we economists have long tried to free ourselves from the shackles of history and politics and tried convincing everyone and ourselves that we have more in common with physics and maths than with humanities. We wanted to be a little deterministic in our approach than probabilistic. Rather, fortunately, no one outside economics believed that lie. And so I am, as an educator and as a student and teacher of economics, I'm looking forward to listening to the diverse voices from humanities and social sciences. I would like to congratulate the organizers, the institutions involved, the Vijnan Jyoti Group, VNR VJIET, the Hyderabad Literary Festival, St. Mary's College, the organizers, Dr. Jayashree, the convener, Dr. D. Sudharani, and co-convener, Dr. MAITHRY Shinde, and all those who have worked hard behind it, especially the lovely students of VNR VJIET. I'm sure your hard work will pay. I look forward to a day of learning. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you, sir. I now welcome Dr. T. Jayashree Garu, Head H&S, VNR Vignanajyoti Institute of Engineering and Technology, to address the gathering.
Good morning. Respected Dr. D.N. Rao Garu, President Vignanajyoti, the scholars of humanities and social sciences, and dear participants, on behalf of VNR Vignanajyoti Institute of Engineering and Technology, Hyderabad, I welcome you all to this two-day national level multidisciplinary symposium on Corona crisis, the road ahead for all nations and societies. The world today, as we all know, has entered an unprecedented state of disarray. The pandemic, in many ways, has reset the society. We are at the dawn of a new era, and the time is right for thinkers and innovators to unite and reshape the functioning of the world. The discipline of humanities and sciences and social sciences, and we at VNR would like to call it the happiness department, has always believed in like-minded individuals working together for a common goal. Hence, we have united with our counterparts at Hyderabad Literary Festival, HLF, and St. Mary's College to determine the best path for humanity. We may be meeting virtually, but at the core, this council intends to find the ties that bind us and to find the harmony that the world needs in the days to come. I thank all the panelists for taking out time to be a part of the symposium, and especially the management, VNR VJIET, for their constant support and encouragement, and Dr. Sudharani and team, especially the students, for taking the initiative to organize this much needed symposium. I hope this symposium results in a fruitful and constructive time for all of us through knowledge sharing and thought-provoking insights. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. I now deem it my privilege to call upon Dr. D.N. Rao Garu, President of VNR Vijnana Jyoti, to address the gathering.
Thank you, and good morning to all of you. First, congratulations for organizing such a topic that's very current and is very important. I like the caption of this one, human societies and nations. Just these two terms made me think, humans and nations. Humans think that they can control the whole universe. They can destroy the whole earth. It has become very egocentric. Our ancient wisdom says there are something like 80 lakh spices, living spices on this earth. And it's recently collaborated with a scientific background. Out of this 80 lakh live similar to ours, how many of them have remained? We have become so egoistic, so self-centered. We have destroyed forests, oceans, mountains, even the life on this earth. That's one part of it. The second part of it is nations. Nations, they have become so mighty, some of them, they think they can rule the world. They can destroy the earth by indiscriminately destroying the climate. They don't care what a degree centigrade of rise on the earth's temperature is, how many lives it will destroy. All this, I think, this the smallest of the small virus, which you can't even see, has made us think. In this light, I think we should discuss the role of humanity and the role of nations in future. Recently, I took up the task of restarting academic environment again, and started actually making restarting manual. And what I thought was, it was very simple. Restarting, okay, you put in things like putting on a mask, wash your hands, maintain the distance, sanitize yourself. That's it. You're ready for restart. But when we go deeper into it, restarting from where we stopped almost 6 months ago, 5 months ago, is not an easy task. If you look at it in the right perspective, you have to look at the values of your institution. Are they in line with the current thinking? At Vijnana Jyoti, fortunately, I think we have a broader picture. From the very beginning, we were saying that the purpose of education is to create a society that is happy and equitable. And also, all people at Vijnana Jyoti, they have this frame of mind that education is for happiness and health, first more than GDP and growth. And then we also have to bring back the ancient wisdom into our system. We have lost all of it. I think it's time we have to bring it back. Both the ancient wisdom, we have to live with the ancient wisdom as long as updating the current technologies and sciences also. And then the third one that we talk about is share and care across the society. That is missing. The world is changing, and I'm sure this COVID will accelerate that change. I will close it with a small example of the success of our philosophy of actually mixing ancient wisdom with the current technology. Very recently, one evening, I was there's an ad appeared on my screen, mobile. 24/7 Apollo hospitals get ready for cough analysis with an artificial intelligence system to detect, self-detect the COVID. I was so thrilled. This was a project that VNR VJIET has started and siphoned off as a startup. And as on today, I understand more than 25,000 people have gone through this test, self-test of analyzing their cough with an artificial intelligence methodology. And simultaneous to it, we have started in our own campus to improve the immunity of our faculty and students. We started what is known as AISH program. We opened next to the coffee day, we opened another counter for AISH medicine and drinks. Okay, and we find it very productive. Okay, so I close it with the saying, I think there is a lot that could be done at various levels. Imagine at VNR VJIET level, we are actually trying to do this at the department, the government departments, at the central government and state government departments, in the bigger companies, what they can do. Okay, I congratulate again for actually choosing this topic of humans and nations. And I wish you a very, very productive sessions. Thank you very much. All the best.
Thank you, sir. May I now introduce our 4 panelists for the first session. I welcome Dr. T. Vijayakumar Garu, Director HLF, for the panel discussion. I welcome Dr. M.V. Rangarao Garu. Dr. M.V. Rangarao Garu is retired registrar, KU. He submitted 25 research papers and attended more than 100 seminars and workshops. 5 students completed their PhD under his guideship and more than 100 students did their LLM. He held several positions like NSS Program Officer, Law Hostel Joint Director, AP Law Set Regional Coordinator, Vice Principal, Principal to Law College, Additional Controller, Dean of Law College, In Charge Registrar, Chairperson, Board of Studies of Law Colleges under Shatavahana University, and Dean of Telugu University Law College, Convener for Telangana State Law Set, KU Registrar in 2016. It gives me pleasure to introduce Dr. E. Sai Baba Reddy Garu. Dr. E. Sai Baba Reddy Garu is presently a professor of civil engineering at JNTU HCEH. He served and held several academic and administrative positions, including Vice Chancellor of Veer Surendra Sai University of Technology. He served as the Rector, Registrar, Director of Academic and Planning, JNTUH. He also served as the Principal, Vice Principal, Coordinator EDP, and also as Head of JNTU HCEH. He obtained his PhD from University of Nottingham, UK. He did his 2 postdoctoral research programs, one from St. Mary's University, Halifax, Canada, and the other from University of Birmingham, UK. He won awards like the American Society for Testing Materials Award for the year 1998 for Outstanding Research Paper, Shamsher Prakash Research Award 2000 from University of Roorkee. He also received the Commonwealth Scholarship for PhD and Commonwealth Fellowship for Postdoctoral Research. He was chairman or member of a number of expert committees formulated by the AP government. He was the convener MSET 2007 and 2008 and convener PRITASET 2008. He also served as expert committee member of AICTE, editorial board member of International Journal of Earth Sciences and Engineering. He is the member of as many as 10 professional bodies in the field of civil engineering and technical education. He has visited as many as 20 foreign universities in UK, US, and Canada. May I now introduce Dr. M. Madhavilata Garu. Madhavilata Maganti Garu is a developmental psychologist interested in studying typical and atypical development in infants and children. She did her PhD from Osmania University. Specifically, her research interests are focused on understanding the developmental courses of intersensory perception in preterm infants, verb acquisition in children. Further, she is interested in examining how early intervention can ameliorate perceptual delays associated with prematurity and other concomitant risk factors. Through her teaching and research interests, she is committed to enhancing public understanding of improving developmental outcomes in at-risk infants and children from birth till 6 years of age. Her book titled Reaching and Programming for Identification of Disabilities is used as a practical guide by health workers in India. Now I request our first panelist and also the moderator for the first session, Dr. T. Vijayakumar Garu, to take over the proceedings.
Thank you, Varshitha. And as I understand the format, I'll first make a presentation on the theme of the symposium from the perspective of a student of literature. And then I will invite the speakers in the order in which their bios have been read out just now. And each of us probably will speak for about 10 minutes, and then we'll take questions. Is 10 minutes what is initially thought of, Sudha? Okay.
Okay, sir. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
It can take 15 to 18 minutes, sir.
Sorry?
Each panelist can take 15 to 18 minutes.
Okay, so 15 minutes. Okay, thank you. I will begin by saying that although we are in the present crisis looking at this pandemic from the perspective of our own generation, but neither the pandemics are new nor literature about the pandemics is new. The world has seen several pandemics, the plague, cholera, and in countries like us, we had smallpox. So the world is not a stranger to pandemics. And similarly, literature has always responded to the horrors of pandemics. Take simple examples right from our nursery rhymes like Ringa Ringa Roses, which could be about the plague pandemic of 17th century, to great classics like Chaucer's Canterbury Tales or T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland, which are about the Spanish flu and so on. So neither the pandemics are new nor literature about the pandemics is new. Now, what is of importance today is how do we understand the current pandemic and what is our vision of the future? Because I think sooner or later, with less or more damage to humanity, this pandemic shall also pass. This shall also pass, as one of the Persian proverbs says, this too shall pass. How much damage it will cause is anybody's guess, but of course, this too shall pass. Now, what is our vision? What is our vision for a future post-pandemic world? And this is where I think, as people who have the luxury, I would say, of looking into the future, it becomes our responsibility to give a vision of the future. But in order for us to give a vision of the future, first we have to understand what is our vision of the present. These days, one of the phrases that is heard very often is the new normal. Now, the new normal suggests that we see the present crisis as a kind of a temporary setback, and we, as the director said, as the chairman said just now, that we will resume. But resume what? That is, will it be business as usual? Will this pandemic, will it not teach us any lessons? Do we not learn anything from the present crisis? Do we simply continue the way we were doing earlier? And this is where I think we need to look at the present in order to think of the future. Just to remind you of what the well-known philosopher Chomsky said recently, that what we are witnessing today, if we think that this is something unexpected, we are making a mistake. He said that this is not something that has happened, that has occurred suddenly. He said that the kind of development models that we have been following for the last several decades and probably a century or more, the present crisis is merely a culmination of the direction in which we were going. We just have been told about how little we really care about the climate change. And we still do not understand the impact of the climate change on human societies. We still think that it is something that is for the scientists to worry about and so on. So how do we look at the present crisis, and what do we learn from the present crisis? Should it not make us reflect on the models of development and the kind of living that we have been following presently? Shall we merely continue after, let's say, another 3 months perhaps, and look at this entire January 2020 to probably the end of the year as merely a pause in the direction in which we are going? Or do we learn something from this present crisis and think of a different world, think of a different future, and think of a different path in the post-pandemic world? And when Chomsky said that this is not unexpected, he gave a concrete example. He said that, for example, there was a proposal in 2014 for making very affordable, very inexpensive ventilators in the US, of course, but it was kind of rejected because it was not considered profitable. And Chomsky says that although this is a crisis that has been there in the waiting, we did not take any steps in either preventing it or being ready for it, precisely because preventing a future pandemic is not seen as something profitable. So this is when we talk about the new normal, we are assuming or we are implying that what we are living today is normal, right? And this is where I think we need to look at our entire attitude, for example, towards nature, because that has just been mentioned. And one writer that I can immediately think of is the Indian writer Amitav Ghosh, who recently, about a couple of years ago, he wrote this non-fictional book called The Great Derangement about climate change and the impact it is going to have. And in his more recent book, which is a fictional book, which is a novel called The Gun Island, he actually shows that the climate change is not just fiction, right? Science fiction has been giving us images of the post-apocalyptic world. And what science fiction has been telling us actually has come true today. If anybody is interested in science fiction, particularly the kind of images that the post-apocalyptic world that the science fiction has projected, you would see how almost, similar, those images are today. For example, corpses lying all around, hospitals being full, and people dying without being admitted. So these are the kind of images that science fiction has been giving us. And we thought that this is fiction, this is future. We never thought that this is going to be our present, right? And so there are lessons to be learned, and as the poet Shelley said, poets are the unacknowledged legislators of the world. That poets, creative people, are not necessarily poets, but creative people have the kind of ability to look into the future and present that future for us. Yes, the present is very depressing, and it is depressing because we are in the middle of a crisis, but literature can do two things. Either it can give us a future which is better than the present, or it can project a future that is worse than the present. So either it can give us an image of utopia, or it can give us an image of Shangri-La, right? By the way, both are fictional worlds. Or it can give us an image of dystopia. But how does literature, how does it do it? What literature does, which I think is probably unique to literature, is literature humanizes the statistics. Today when we talk about 2% mortality or 2.3% mortality, those figures don't really make any sense as statistics. But remember, behind every fraction of that statistic are scores and scores of human lives. And if you imagine a situation where you just go and talk to a family which has just lost one of its dear ones, and you just tell them that the mortality rate has come down by 0.000.1%. It doesn't make any sense. So what literature does is that it humanizes the statistics. And what it also does is that it concretizes an abstract idea. See, the pandemic, the virus, the invisible virus that is with us is something that is very abstract for us. And the suffering that we hear on television or through news, etc., remains very, very abstract. And it is literature. By the way, literature, I don't mean only English literature, any good literature in any language. What literature does is that it concretizes an abstract idea. Suffering, for example, is something that is very abstract. But what a literary text does is that it actually turns it into a human emotion. And what it also does is that it makes the individual represent the universe. Chalam, the great Telugu writer, said in the preface to Sri Sri's Mahaprasthanam that Krishna Shastri, Devulapalli Krishna Shastri, could make his pain, the pain of the world. That is, he could make the world feel his pain. And Sri Sri, on the other side, felt the world's pain as if it is his personal agony. So it is this ability of a writer, it is this ability of a creative artist to transform the personal into a universal, and at the same time, turn the universal into the personal. That makes literature a powerful instrument in actually making us understand the human dimension of any crisis, not just this crisis, but any crisis. And therefore, I think we need to, but what kind of literature? What kind of literature, again, is something that depends on the ability of the writer and the artistry, the skill of the writer. the American writer, Gertrude Stein once told another famous American writer, Hemingway, that statements are not literature. It's not enough for a writer merely to take a very topical issue and write about it. But the writer should have the ability to turn, as I said, a personal pain and make the world realize the human element of that particular pain. Again, this German philosopher Adorno once said, or at least reportedly said, that there cannot be poetry after Auschwitz, the massacre of the Jews. So he said that even, in fact, some translations even suggest that Adorno felt that writing poetry is barbaric after Auschwitz. But at the same time, if we know that it is the writers who actually prepare us for a post-crisis world by actually making us realize what the crisis was all about. And writers with skill, writers who have the capability of looking into the future, but at the same time also have the ability to transform a topical issue into a timeless classic. It is those kind of writings which we look forward to give us an insight into the present and also present to us a vision of the future. And I hope many writers will respond to it, not merely as a topical issue, but as a human crisis. Everybody, today talks about it as a health crisis. I think it is not a health crisis. It is a human crisis, because we have brought on ourselves this particular crisis. And if we don't learn anything from this crisis, and if we merely visualize the future merely as a replica of the present, then we are failing in our responsibility to think an alternative world. The world can be, again, to just give you one more example, I think in the 1970s, there was this well-known, I think as a commercial venture, it was a failure, but it was a very futuristic film in Telugu called Maro Prapancham, where there is an imagination of an alternative world. There is an imagination of a world that can be different, from the present. This is what the World Social Forum also says, which says another world is possible. It's not as if that we have to continue to live the same way that we are doing, but we can always imagine an alternative, a different future. But it is the responsibility, I think, of the creative people, be it writers or be it artists, to give us a vision of a different world, a world which is hopefully much better than the world that we are living in. So, again, Amitav Ghosh said recently that he expects many writers, he expects many novels to be written about this present pandemic. But obviously, not every writer will have that ability to turn a present crisis into a future vision. And I think the world really awaits the creative people to give us a vision of an alternative future and a better world. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to say a few words about what I think, as a student of literature, the role of literature is in imagining a future world. Because I think the poverty of the worst kind is the poverty of imagination. And if we are not able to visualize a future, imagine a future, I think we are the worst for it. So thank you very much. And I now invite the next speaker to please make his presentation.
Good morning to all. Good morning to all. So president of the function and chief guest and guests and experts on the panel, and my dear student friends. So I'm Professor Rangarao, a law student. And first of all, at the outset, I thank the organizers of VJIET for giving the opportunity to speak few words on this occasion. So I congratulate them. I deem it privilege to be part of this wonderful interdisciplinary symposium involved in so many departments to discuss about the impact of COVID-19 and also the steps to be taken. So as a law student, I'll restrict myself to the law point of view to discuss about the some of the issues only. So as all of you know, that the COVID is a very dangerous disease, which is declared as a pandemic by the WHO, and which has taken the entire human life in the globe, and it has its negative impact on all fields of human life: social, cultural, political, economic, legal, education, public health, and whatnot, everything, even religious issues, temples, whatnot, everything. So as a law student, I already said that I restrict myself to the law only, issues relating to law only. So this COVID-19 has very badly affected the field of law also. So some of the subjects which are badly affected is contract law, banking and insolvency law, bankruptcy law, company law, industrial law, transport law, international law, even constitutional law, human rights law, and also the procedures followed in the judiciary, that is judicial system, also affected to some extent by this COVID. So let us discuss briefly. I want to discuss very briefly some of the aspects of these topics. Okay, so as all of you know that the COVID has started in the Wuhan region in China in the month of December 19. And when the world has come to the devastating stage due to the coronavirus 19 that has left most of the countries in the state of pity, the World Health Organization has described coronavirus as a pandemic on March 11th this year, basing on the assessment of the outbreak around the clock and around the world. Today, all countries in the globe are adversely affected with the unprecedented pandemic. A few of the countries who have demonstrated that this virus can be suppressed and controlled, but subsequently proved futile. This pandemic is disrupting lives and livelihood of the people around the globe and shaking economic systems to their core. It is evident today that some countries are struggling with a lack of capacity. Some are struggling with lack of resources. Some countries are struggling with the lack of knowledge to resolve the and facing many more other effects, both in domestic and international issues, such as preparedness to shift stranded people at various places, both within the country and abroad. Life during the pandemic has unexpected adverse behavioral trends in Asian Pacific countries, including India. COVID-19 has adverse effect on all walks of life of global human beings. However, many governments have taken immediate measures to cure the affected patients in ways such as lockdown, quarantine, and hospitals, etc. To protecting the jobs and reduce the impact of COVID on vulnerable population. They will also prepare fiscal stimulus packages to restart the economy of the once the health emergency is over. Aggressive measures to find, isolate, test, treat, and trace of the persons affected are not only the best and fastest way out to control the pandemic, and also the best way to prevent them. It is the high time now to analyze the effects of the pandemic in various spheres, not only the developing, but most developed countries and well-equipped countries like America, Italy, and Spain have failed in controlling the effects of it. The rate of transmission of pandemic has been rapidly increasing. For example, if you take as on today in the world, 1,76,15,315 cases are reported, out of which 6,79,457 persons have died. If you take India, 16,38,870 people are reported COVID-19 and 35,747 deaths are occurred. Okay, so this is the state of COVID-19 as on today. And sorry, 1 minute. Affected till date. And with a high rise in the number of infected people, the only method to control the virus from reaching the rest of the mass is to alienate people from each other. Though the government's quarantine-related countermeasures have caused significant restrictions on public life in the countries, in the light of the pandemic, the economic consequences are increasingly getting into focus. Moreover, there are plenty legal implications arising from the epidemic, such as handling of affected employment relations, insurance coverage, epidemic-related damages in the field of travel law. And as already told, the pandemic adversely affected many fields of life like contract law, industrial law, business law, banking law, insolvency law, human rights law, and constitutional law, etc. Coming to the India, the first COVID-19 case in India was detected in Thrissur district on 30th January in the state of Kerala, when university student from Wuhan to travel back to the state. And at the same day, World Health Organization declared it as public health emergency of international concern. I wish to draw attention in this connection, your attention to this of this August body. The issue is relating to stranded migrant labor, stranded Indian citizens abroad, economic incentives, rescuing the citizens, including those who are employed in industrial and private sectors, so on. Looking into the gravity of such adverse impact on poor migrant and voiceless labor, there is every necessity to take into consideration of such issues. The right to health care and protection has been recognized in India since early times. And in independent India, the constitutional mandate and approach of the public as a right holder and state as a duty-bounded primary provider of health of all. Article 21 of the Constitution of India guaranteed the fundamental right to life and personal liberty. And we find many mandates in the directive principles as well. The new agenda for the public health in India includes the epidemiological transition also, and the emerging and re-emerging diseases like drug-resistant TB, malaria, SARS, avian flu, and the swine flu, and the current COVID-19 pandemic. I am of the opinion that the present underinvestment in public health system poses a challenge to COVID-19 containment plans, where substantial increase in GDP is required to be provided. Epidemiological and public health experts say that increasing expenditure on the public health system is key to building trust. Positive cases and death toll due to the coronavirus is ever increasing, coupled with huge variation in combating the issue in various states in the country. The union and state governments has almost stopped release of medical bulletins, and even released people have no trust on the veracity of the same. Added to this stigma has aggravated the problem of escaping quarantine. Isolation is mostly out of fear and stigma and wanting to be with one's family since it is for a prolonged time, as well as lack of income. It is inevitably essential on the part of the government to bring confidence levels in the people of overcoming the crisis soon and come up with a roadmap to utilize the pandemic as opportunities, opening avenues in many sectors. Coming to the impact of law, the pandemic has already caused a huge loss and expected to exploit more of the economy. Strict measures will have to be adopted by the government to cover loss. The virus that is spreading unleashed in the human society has now outreached the legal spheres also. The collective commitment to fight the disease has crossed the limits set by certain laws laid down in the Constitution. Mass surveillance, tracking people through the mobile data are some of them. This is the step towards the interference with the right to privacy of people. The complete lockdown imposed due to COVID-19 around country has restricted the movement of which amounts to infringement of a right to freedom. The courts at the most of the places around the nation are not working today, resulting in delay in imparting justice. Many of the contracts are being cancelled due to this deadly virus. The supply chain is disrupted. The timeline is extended. The labor class people who are moving to their native places on foot from the distant far away are even debarred of their right to life and dignity. However, in times of pandemic, The protection of right to health for all must be primary aim of the state policies and measures, because pandemics and state response thereto can also pose significant risk to many other social rights. Protection of freedom of expression and media freedom in times of pandemic is of vital importance. Therefore, regulating the sprawling new social media like web, WhatsApp, etc., and empowering reliable, trustworthy news sources become important imperatives during this pandemic period to avoid spreading of fake, false information to the people. And to deal with the various issues relating to the pandemic and to cut the risk as soon as possible, every country needs to a legal framework which authorizes authorities to take reasonable steps to control this pandemic. In UK, enacted the Coronavirus Act 2020, which is a comprehensive legislation dealing with all issues connected with the COVID-19, including emergency registration of healthcare professionals, temporary closure of educational institutions, audiovisual facilities for criminal proceedings, powers to restrict gatherings, and financial assistance to industry, etc. Similarly, Singapore has passed Infectious Diseases Regulation Act 2020, which provides for issuance of stay orders under which a risk individual can be sent to a government-specified accommodation facility, etc. UK and Singapore's laws set out unambiguous conditions and legally binding obligations such under the Singapore law, for example, the voluntaries may be penalized up to $10,000. Violators may be penalized up to $10,000 or for 6 months imprisonment or both. In contrast, in our country, Section 188 of Indian Penal Code has a provision for imposition of fine of amount of rupees 200 to 1,000 or imprisonment 1 month to 6 months period. Even then, proceeding under Section 188 IPC can only be initiated by a private complaint and not through the FIR. As such, offences arising out of these guidelines and orders weak basis in terms of criminal jurisdiction, thereby weakening the object of law. The Indian government on March 22nd, 2020 declared a nationwide lockdown, restricting the movement of people to their houses. This was a major step that helped the government to cope with the pandemic to a great extent. The lockdown has been carried out by the state government and district authorities under the directions of the Union Ministry of Home Affairs under the Disaster Management Act of 2005, which was intended to provide for the effective management and disasters and for matters connected with the incidental thereto. Under the Act, the National Disaster Management Authority, NDMA, was set up and the under the leadership of PM. And the National Executive Committee was chaired by the Home Secretary to issue orders to the Union Ministers and state government and authorities to take effective measures to prevent the spread of COVID-19 and lay down guidelines during the lockdown. Let us discuss about the existing law that our country has which provides in the center and state governments the appropriate powers against the persons affected by corona to put him quarantine or to penalize the people or the institute that may violate the regulations made by the appropriate government. Those acts are the existing laws are Epidemic Disasters Act, Epidemic Diseases Act 1897, and the Disaster Management Act 2005, and 144 of the CRPC and 188 of IPC, etc. And also we shall deal with the limitations that current framework and provide some measures to make framework a worth one in the crucial period. I am not going to discuss with the details of this act because of lack of time, and I'll proceed. The judicial system, how the COVID-19 is affected the judicial system or judiciary in our country, keeping in view the global outbreak of this virus and the growing number of cases in India, our judicial system has taken a few remarkable steps to control the spread of this virus within India. Several courts and tribunals in India have partially shut down, and only urgent hearing will be carried out in order to avoid human interface. Many courts and tribunals have also issued directions for closing down filing counters and advocate chambers. Owing to this present situation, the Supreme Court of India has also decided to promote the virtual court proceedings, e-filing, to prevent lawyers from coming to courts, which in turn will help avoid the transmission of the virus. And a 3-judge bench of the Apex Court has exercised its powers granted under Article 142, read with Article 141 of the Constitution of India, and extended the period of limitation for filing appeals, petitions, suits, and all other proceedings in courts and in tribunals owing to the serious outbreak of the pandemic. The Honorable Apex Court has extended the period of limitation in the filing of petitions, appeals, suits, applications, and all other proceedings after taking suo motu cognizance of the current situation in the country and the challenges being faced by the lawyers to come to the courts physically for filing the petitions, applications, etc. within the period of limitation prescribed under the general law of limitation or special laws. And Article 142 of the Constitution in India gives inherent power to the Supreme Court of India to pass any such decree or order as is necessary for doing complete justice in any cause or matter pending before it. Article 141 states that the decision of the Supreme Court would be binding upon other courts in India. The central government, while exercising its powers conferred under the proviso to Section 4 of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, has increased the threshold of rupees 1 lakh for triggering insolvency to rupees 1 crore. Keeping in mind the current situation of the country, the central government has taken this step to provide relief to the companies who shall not be in a position to pay off its debts amidst this present crisis. This would help to protect many companies from being insolvent, who are facing financial problem and are not being able to pay off their debts, which are less than rupees 1 crore. And I want to mention some of the issues regarding misuse of Epidemic Disease Act. So in certain instances, I want to refer the Epidemic Diseases Act drafted by the colonial state in 1897 to take special measures and prescribe regulations for the better prevention of the dangerous epidemic diseases. But there are certain instances of heavy-handed and arbitrary use or misuse during the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. Patients, journalists, social workers, political leaders have been at the receiving end of this blunt instrument, which does not actually define epidemic disease, leave alone the pandemic. Of course, combating COVID-19 does require extensive surveillance, including identification of carriers of the virus and their contacts. But in most of the parts of the world and our country, a growing body of the literature has underlined that the extraordinary measures are best undertaken by taking citizens into confidence, using persuasion and involving the community. At several places, however, state authorities are giving the go-by to these imperatives and asserting state power. They are deemed to have been undertaken in good faith. For example, in April, when knowledge of the virus was still uncertain among the large sections of the people, an FIR was slapped against a family of a technician from Bangalore who had contacted COVID-19 for simple reason for hiding information. They were charge sheeted under Epidemics Act. The last month also, the Mumbai police invoked the law to arrest a journalist alleging that his social media posts led to unrest among the migrant workers in suburban Bandra. A toxic mix of this Disaster Management Act 2005, Section 144 of the CRPC, and the Epidemics Act may well be on its way to becoming the new sedition law, which has been invoked with disturbing frequency in the recent past to criminalize the criticism and dissent. Recently, the Gujarat government combined the sedition law with the Disaster Management Act to charge a journalist for reporting a news item against the government for improper handling of the pandemic. In another instance, 4 FIRs have been filed against a journalist in Himachal Pradesh for highlighting the condition of stranded labor in the pandemic. The FIR alleged that these reports are fake and sensational news. The Apex Court must intervene to allow people to voice their opinions freely during a crisis, and especially in without the threat of their being criminalized. And finally, I want to say that the outbreak of COVID-19 is affecting litigation in multiple ways and has also crippled the courts across the country as judges, advocates, litigants are trying to achieve justice under the law while balancing public safety. The rapid spread of this virus has led to the closing down of courts and tribunals in the country to avoid human association and to curb the spread of novel coronavirus in the country. However, the central government and judiciary has taken plural steps to provide relief to the people who are facing the unprecedented challenge. Even though the courts have been shut down, the Honorable High Court of India has decided to take up urgent matters via virtual techniques so that the advocates and litigants don't have to appear physically in the courts in the present situation. The Honorable High Supreme Court of India has also directed the respective bars to promote virtual proceedings and e-filing. Even the court suo moto, taking cognizance of the challenges being faced by the lawyers to present before the courts physically for filing of respective appeals, petitions, etc., and has extended the period of limitation until its further order. With this hopes the fight against the coronavirus and put a stop on its widening territory. To combat against such belligerent situation, a nation requires an adequate legal framework which provides the authority appropriate forces to fight against such pandemic disease. Our country is trying its best to save the citizens from becoming a prey to the pandemic disease, COVID-19. But there is also a need to make the Epidemic Disease Act 1897, which was passed 123 years back, more staunch, as this act is based on which the whole procedure to fight back depends. Nobody can deny that the government is doing its best to save the precious life of its citizens, but to reduce it from spreading, we can do it. It's time that we show some unity, solidarity between the citizens of the country towards saving life of each other. Let us act as responsible citizens for the sake of humanity. Stay home, stay safe. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to say these few words from the legal point of view, from the law point of view. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Rangaravu. May I just make a quick announcement?
You unmute, sir. Vijay Kumar, sir.
I have unmuted.
I am not able to listen to you. You are not audible. Vijay Kumar, sir.
I have unmuted.
Please unmute. Please unmute.
Unmute చేశారు సార్ ఇప్పుడు బాగుంది.
I have unmuted.
Yes, please.
Is audible, sir. Go ahead.
Vijay Kumar, sir, please unmute your mic. We are unable to listen you, hear you.
ఆయన అన్మ్యూట్ చేసుకున్నారని we are all able to hear him. మరి మీ సిస్టమ్ చెక్ చేసుకోండి ఒకసారి.
Yeah, it's okay, sir.
Thank you. I hope everybody can
Madam,
hear this.
something has happened. We are unable to hear. Vijay Kumar, sir, is not audible.
Rangara garu, you have to check your system because all the others can hear him. Only you are not able to hear him.
Sir, again, you have to log in, sir. That is better. I think you can quit and log in, sir.
You mean I?
Not you, sir.
Okay.
Rangaravu, sir. Yeah, yours is audible, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Sudha ma'am, can you call him up and tell him the difficulty? No, he might have. Call him up. Yeah.
Yeah, I think in the meanwhile, we can continue with our next speaker. I understand that Dr. Sai Baba Reddy is unable
Sir is not audible, sir.
Okay. What is the problem?
Sir, Rangaravu, sir. Rangaravu, sir. I think the problem is with your mic only, sir.
They're calling him up, sir. No.
Okay.
They're calling him up.
Yeah, a few people are not able to hear. I think they have silenced their.
Yeah, I think Mr. Vijay Kumar, all others I think can hear you.
Okay, then I think we should go ahead.
Please carry on.
I understand that Dr. Sai Baba Reddy is maybe unable to join right now, and if he joins later on, we will welcome him towards the end of this panel. We are supposed to conclude this panel by 12 o'clock. And before I invite the next speaker, I just wanted to make a quick announcement that all the questions to the panelists, I request the audience to please type it in the chat box, and on your behalf, I'll ask the questions, put the questions to the panelists. So after that legal aspect of the present crisis and how we are dealing with it legally, and the dangers that are there of misuse of the law that Professor Rangarao mentioned. I now invite our next speaker, Dr. Madhavi Lata from Ashoka University, to make her presentation on the given theme. And of course, she is a psychologist, and we know that the present crisis has impacted us in different ways. Even staying at home 24 hours a day is also has a great effect. As one of my friends during college time used to say, homesickness has a different meaning now. It's sick of being at home. So Dr. Madhavi Lata will speak now about the topic. Thank you very much. Yeah, you may start now.
Thank you, Professor Vijay Kumar, for this. First of all, a warm welcome to all of you from the small district of Sonipat here in Haryana, where Ashoka University is located. So just that it's a different state from the state of Andhra that we are, from the two Telugu-speaking states. Let me just, while I reiterate and echo all the thoughts and the coronavirus has actually brought into this scenario, I would want to thank the VNR VJIET leadership, and also to all the students and colleagues for giving me this opportunity to be part of this panel today. So let me just start off to give you a small, tiny understanding of where we come from and what Ashoka University is about. Because I want to speak of Ashoka University, especially because of what the present symposia actually talks about in terms of the human societies and nations. So Ashoka University is a pioneering liberal arts and sciences university. That's a private university which has started just about 5 years back. And it has brought in all of the liberal arts and sciences together as an interdisciplinary blend, and to provide that enriching nature of education of liberal arts model into the pedagogy, so that it helps the present generation of students to get in a very broad perspective of not only arts and humanities and sciences and maths together on a very broad platform. So it is so relevant for the present kind of crisis and pandemic that we are in. And that's one of the reasons why I see the value of a liberal arts model of education right now seems to be quite relevant in the present times. To talk about a little from a psychological science perspective, I reiterate and echo the thoughts of Professor Vijay Kumar in terms of bringing about a very literary insight into this crisis of the enriching nature and insightfulness of imagination that comes from science fiction versus the poverty of not being able to imagine. And also reiterate and echo how this corona crisis has had legal implications, as elaborately mentioned by Professor Rangarao Garu in this talk. And while I bring in a kind of a psychological science perspective to this, I see psychological science has emerged to be a newer science because it brings in a very rich blend of arts and humanities and the science perspective very effectively. And that's why I really say that psychological science to this crisis has an immense relevance for what we are talking, not only of trying to understand the biological aspects of what the pandemic we are in, but also the social, cultural, legal, economic, and the overall humanitarian crisis that we have in. Because psychologists are kind of very well trained, where they can find in a topic that can be that's out there and it can be studied very scientifically. So that's one of the reasons why I see the relevance of the psychological science. Let me put this in the slide mode for you all. Okay, I think, okay, that's basically what it is. Okay, so this is Ashoka University. Just to give you a glimpse of, we have started very recently, and so I thought I'll just give you a small introduction about how the Ashoka University, and especially the psychology program at Ashoka University, is built from a very science-centric, bringing in both the contemporary approaches of psychological science to the field. And of course, this is being mentioned in the Association for Psychological Science, which is the nodal organization of psychological science across the world today. So we offer a BSc program in honors in psychology with an interdisciplinary blend of a lot more courses, where students have the option of majoring in psychology and minoring in other subjects like sociology, maths, computer science, biology, etc., from all the other fields that we have in. And of course, our faculty at the Department of Psychology have wide-ranging interest in psychological neuroscience and social cultural approaches to understanding human thought, feelings, and behavior. So we have our individual labs that we work. And therefore, I see how when we started with the severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus that has caused this kind of COVID 2019, and the very fact that all of us have reiterated this as a humanitarian crisis, we can see that it is basically it is a biopsychosocial emergency that the world has faced. And why do I say this is a biopsychosocial emergency itself? I mean, you can see that the nature, the expanding widespread nature of how this pandemic has had an influence on our lives today itself, the breadth and the nature of how widespread it is. It's just not like a tsunami where it has been localized, or an earthquake which has been localized to a certain part of the world, but the widespread that every country today needs to face. And the kind of crisis and the magnitude of crisis that this whole emergency brings in has both psychological and biological emergencies that we are talking about. So it's one of the times where it brings in, not that all researchers were not involved in bringing about or filling about the gaps in knowledge, but it has brought to us that higher level of consciousness and the kind of cohesiveness that we need to have to address the kind of key gaps that have emerged in this pandemic. So it has enabled how researchers can actually help. And basically, psychological science not only has a theoretical perspective, but it's also a perspective that can be applied to the community, where it can help to solve the real-time problems that are there on ground. And particularly, I say this very clearly because it's not that we never had problems. The problems already existed, but we have an additional layer of problem with the virus in the air right now. And what did this virus do to our lives? It has disrupted a kind of changes in our life at the individual level, family level, societal level, country level, and across the world. And this widespread nature itself requires not only the kind of basic research, but a research that needs to be applied to come to immediate solutions that we have. And from the past 2-3 months, we have seen a huge, I mean, at least I can say there have been a deluge of a number of papers that have been coming across in papers, in scientific journals, in the OSF platforms, where preprints are available on the kind of key insights that are essential to build in this gap in knowledge that's there. Because it's a kind of the humanitarian crisis that calls for this kind of emergency at this time. But what does the research have to do? Research has to help policymakers, educators, health professionals, all the people to be able to come to make informed decisions. And this informed decisions is something that we talk about, that the psychological science can contribute, because it's just not only about bringing or talking about STEM or humanities, but rather a very, very collaborative, cohesive approach of an interdisciplinary blend of how this pandemic is going to impact us and how do we need to shape our future. Because the future is, we cannot just say that. I agree with Professor Vijay Kumar when he mentioned that if we were to anticipate the future is going to be something like what has come, or it is something that we resume after the virus is gone, is just not going to happen right now. It's going to be some kind of disruption, the kind of residual kind of disruption that has happened right now will continue to stay for us within the next decade in terms of many, many implications that it's going to have. So therefore, psychological science is a huge, immense way of contributing in helping societies recover from this kind of a crisis that we have. And therefore, that is one of the reasons why I call this as a biopsychosocial emergency. And why do I call this as a biopsychosocial emergency? Let me say, I'll just kind of give you a very, in the overview of my talk, I'll give you a little bit touch upon the principles of psychological science. It's not because nobody can understand, but it's just to reiterate some of the fact about why we need, in this kind of humanitarian crisis and biopsychosocial emergency, that psychological science can bring into the picture. And how do we apply these principles to understand the kind of crisis, especially that we are heading for an impending mental health pandemic right now. It's just not a pandemic that's so much of the disease, but it's so much that's going to have a spillover and how much it's going to have an effect. So just to talk about a little on the principles of psychological science, especially the classical, the contemporary approaches of how we try to understand biology, evolution, and psychological development. The nature of science of psychology by itself is biopsychosocial science of animal behavior. When we call it as an animal behavior, it's something that an animal has a nervous system, a brain, and any behavior that's connected with the brain itself is what we call it as animal behavior. And I mean, there has also been, it's basically also to give you a kind of a starting point to understand that animal behavior is so much of a biopsychosocial science by itself. It's just not only of studying brain in isolation, but in studying brain in the context of an integrative levels of where we are talking in the way that we want to talk about in this world. So it actually brings in a family of hierarchies of this natural phenomena at different levels, at the social level, at the cultural level, economic point, at so many different, not only at the biological aspects of where the behavior is grounded, but the kind of cultural and psychological dimensions of integration calls for it as a biopsychosocial science. And because it is a biopsychosocial science, we are addressing a biopsychosocial emergency that calls for why the nature of science of psychology is very, very important and integral for understanding the complexity of the pandemic that we are right now. That we have taught, we cannot say that psychology is just only of applied biology, nor is biology applied chemistry, but rather it is an amalgamation of all of these sciences put together that actually brings in this uniqueness of understanding the science of behavior, which is so much influenced by the principles of other sciences and complexity that we are talking about. So therefore, we are bringing about biology, psychology, sociology, all of this together. In fact, all of the aspects from literary sciences, from medical sciences, from legal sciences, all of this put together to understand this complexity of the unique science of behavior that we are in right now. So therefore, psychology as a natural science, we are at this point in science of human development where we must move on to a more arduous task of integration of biological and these contextual influences within this developmental system that we are talking about. And therefore, we call upon psychology as a unique science. It's just not biological science we call, but it is a psychological science, which is so much embedded in the relational developmental systems that we are talking about. And these relational systems are very important and integral to understand the nature of the crisis, the nature of what this pandemic has brought about at different levels of organization and levels of integration that we have to bring about in society. So that's basically why we need to have this kind of a relational, holistic position in understanding the biological structure, the psychological state, and the ecological context. So this pattern of interrelations, of understanding all this, is a really developmental system approach in trying to understand. Hello, can you all hear me?
Yes. For a moment, there was a break, but now you are back.
Thank you. Just... So therefore, let me start maybe from the current slide. Yeah. So therefore, to reiterate back and coming back to the point what I would have missed is trying to understand this kind of a relational processes of the biological structures, the psychological states, and the ecological context that we are talking about in trying to understand and address the magnitude of the crisis that the pandemic has caused, along already occurring problems that we always had. That we never existed of, there was no problems, but problems always existed. And so therefore, I would want to state that modus operandi of psychology is the study of this dynamic relations between these multiple elements comprising of these psychological systems. So therefore, the environment thus is seen to be part of an organismic whole. So we do not progress in the course of our lives from a stage of biological incompletion as mere organisms to one of social completion as full-fledged persons. We are fully and indissolubly organisms and person from beginning to end. I mean, that's where the literary aspect of reiterating Professor Vijay Kumar's element, the human element of pain that he was talking about, is quite relevant in terms of trying to bring about how the humanness and the humanitarian crisis that we are in right now, and why psychological science as a natural science and as a unique science is very important. I mean, even to what we are talking about and how do we and present crisis. Let me cite my own example in terms of how we had to adjust. So there was this pandemic, and it kind of, in the beginning of the lockdown phase that we were in, it was a very anxious, nervous situation that I had to face. It just led me to a lot of stress and anxiety, because it was not only about transitioning to an online virtual media of delivering lectures and coping with the changes, but it was also this immense ambiguity of what the situation is going to be, how is the health going to be, how are we going to look into all of this, because I mean, every day in and day out, there were news channels that flashed in to said, oh, these many people have contracted this. This is going to happen. It is going to be like this. And also here, our own colleagues who tested positive for COVID, and the kind of health implications this would have had. So it just not only felt that this kind of anxiety to be able to cope with this, it was a lot of stress and anxious moments that I had to learn to manage. But imagine magnitude it could happen when we consider a group of individuals, families, societies, and people of all age groups, and across the states, the nations, and the world across. When we actually go across in terms of this crisis just is not a localized one. It is so generalized one, right? So that's why in the beginning, when Sudha mentioned it's kind of a warlike situation, I agree with her in terms of that it is a kind of a warlike situation right now. And it looks to be like we are fighting and waging a war against this very invisible virus that's actually disrupted a lot of our what it has brought about. We are now able to make connections very virtually. We have transitioned, we have made this change. It's amazing to see the kind of changes we have been able to make. Even it's amazing to see how third grade, second grade, fourth grade kids have got adjusted to the online media of education. It is amazing right now. So I mean, while we are trying to make adjustments and be resilient in terms of what's happening to the crisis, and there have been many aspects of how our, and what we are calling it as the new normal, because going out never felt something. It was a very simple thing. We just would go out. But these days, going out would be something that's so difficult to think about. We have to think twice if we want to go out. We have to think twice even for going to get our groceries, to buy our vegetables. All of these things is kind of the anxious, nervous situation that we are in. So therefore, when we talk about this humanitarian crisis that we are in, I mean, day in and day out, I think WHO, UNICEF, all the international organizations, the World Bank, all of these organizations have come out with kind of policy brief reports. And many of them have started to talk on what are the implications of this kind of pandemic. What is the mental health crisis that it is causing about? And how this kind of uncertainty, this ambiguity that has brought about has had implications for all the people of all the age groups that we are talking about. And these are some few examples that I'm showing on to you on the screen about how some of this have actually had about. So in trying to understand all of this that we can see, you also see that we are caught up in these dichotomies as well. Which way to head? Is it this way or that way? Which way do we go about? In spite of whatever is the intelligence, the motivation, there is a lot of underground fear and anxiety in our decision making, in basically what we are thinking about. And so therefore, you can see the whole mix of where the truth and reality, the kind of apprehension and ambiguities, the paradox of what it is, and also to accept what it is, what exactly do we need? Medical help? Do we need psychological help? Whether this kind of pandemic we had anticipated or we knew about it, but it was just a mere failure of the human bias to accept predictions. So predictions basically are something that we do make predictions, but anticipating and thinking that this prediction is going to come true around this time, and it is something that we need to be prepared, is something just as a very biased one. So therefore, there is a kind of reluctance to accept this kind of, because we know that we had anticipated a pandemic, an impending pandemic, but the failure, I wouldn't say failure, but a little bit of lack of preparedness in being able to handle the pandemic of this size was immense. So though all of us and most of the organizations and the world across were able to come down with immediate measures in resolving this crisis. But it still is something that always existed, and it will continue to exist ever after. So this kind of an understanding would something at least try to see that we do not want to think about in terms of dichotomies, or either or solutions to the problems, but rather understand the comprehensive nature of how this kind of crisis needs to be addressed at different levels of the thinking, and bringing about the interdisciplinary approaches to our understanding in terms of the magnitude of the crisis by itself. Second, it's also very important thinking about this and trying to think about human behavior. There's a lot of thinking errors that we make and cognitive biases, because something that seemed like wear a mask, you can actually wash your hands, use sanitizers, be able to do this. These kind of very prescriptive processes of the pandemic in terms of stay home, stay safe, all of these that actually came out at the beginning of the lockdown, and the kind of immediate changes that we were able to bring about. And of course, Professor Rangarao actually mentioned about the kind of legal changes that were brought into the legal system to be able to handle this kind of an immediate emergency that was brought about. And even in spite of all of this, human behavior actually is kind of entrenched into this kind of thinking errors and cognitive biases. And the kind of illusions, the fallacies, the heuristics, and the biases actually are something that are very, very difficult to handle. And that's one of the reasons can curtail the virus from spreading. People had a lot of forethought in terms of that the community spread needs to be stopped. We can stop the virus if we are able to bring about these kind of things. But nevertheless, we need to handle thinking errors and cognitive biases of human behavior in terms of being able to curtail the kind of crisis that we are in right now. So amidst these dichotomies, these kind of errors and cognitive biases that we speak about, I mean, researchers basically have been able to come out with very good questions, methodologies, and practices immediately right now. So most of our labs and most of the people across in the area of psychological science have started to transition to online platforms of data collection. They started to collect data more online methodologies, the eye tracking methodologies, the kind of immense technology, leveraging technology to be able to handle and bring about and use these methodologies to be able to understand the impact of this the impact of the epidemic on psychological, mental health, the social level, the kind of and the economic crisis that it has brought about and the impact it could have had has been immense, and institutions, universities have a lot more supported this. And the kind of transition immediately that the universities were able to transition to online teaching platforms very quickly itself is a very good example of how we could transition and address this kind of a situation in the kind of urgency without by also being able to see that we do not compromise on the educational standards of the students at the universities, at the schools, and even at the lower levels, at the UG, I mean the kindergarten levels as well. As even kindergarten kids actually had to do this. So therefore, which involved a lot of interaction with scientists, with subjects. And this particular symposium is one good example of how the interaction of this interdisciplinary blend of people across disciplines has brought about this platform. So there is a constant interactions that we have been having. I mean, never before we could bring in this kind of amazing interaction of interdisciplinary professionals across the platform. But now I see this kind of immense need that has happened, and we have been able to address this need very quickly, and also the kind of, psychology's own beliefs and about all of this has quickly brought about very different levels of research. Some of them addressing very specific research areas in their own areas of work. So we've been able to look into trying to address primary health systems, which I will talk a little later on about what our lab will do. So therefore, you can see that amidst all of this, we've been able to address all these of a very scientific modality of thinking and discussions that have been happening, and research priorities that we have been able to outline have something of immense value right now that we are bringing about to be able to handle not only a pandemic, but it's also a mental health pandemic that we are talking about. So we've seen how young people have been affected. So most people, like I mentioned, are emotionally exhausted. There is increased sadness from the levels of being exhaustion that you can see to the levels of stress, anxiety, depression, and how people are able to handle this kind of mental health issues that have been happening, because there have been people already with mental health, compromised mental health, but also you see another layer of how, because of the epidemic and the pandemic that we're talking, has also brought in this kind of additional mental health compromise, because people are not able to go out to be able to handle. So we've seen many students who have actually complained that they've not been able to get to the hospitals to get their medication for their mental health. There've been an increased upsurge of substance abuse in most of the youngsters. People with a lot of substance abuse have been having a lot of trouble. We have seen that in the news reports quite constantly about how people have been able to handle. So these are some kind of studies which have come up very recently in terms of trying to say that, the prevalence of the different emotions that are there right now. From being inspired to excited to being nervous, anxious, calm and content and relaxed, to being bored, depressed, exhausted is kind contrary emotions that we seem to be experiencing at the moment. There are some at some end who kind of might try to calm themselves to, there are others at some end trying to handle anxiety, trying to handle nervousness, stress, and feeling exhaustion, versus the other extremes of being depressed, bored, and bored of the monotony that this is bringing about, inability to be able to talk. We are kind of completely separated from the family systems that we have been constantly engaged. We are used to going out to and meet with friends, but right now we are not able to use this kind of psychosocial support processes. That's in case. It's also that this inability to not being able to go to our friends' places, inability to not being able to, even I see that we are not able to go to our parents' house very easily, because we have a fear that we might. There is a kind of transmission, a good scope for being able to transmit this, or what would happen to the health of our dear ones. All of this and our own inability to be to get out to handle any kind of emergency that would have surfaced, this kind of anxiety that it is putting us, has put in this kind of social isolation, has compromised on the mental health outcomes. So this kind of psychological impact that this pandemic has is just not only, we call it as humanitarian, and extends to the level of mental health by itself that we are talking about. I mean, these are kind of very immediate studies that have happened in the Indian community, where there was a survey of 653 respondents. About 33.2% have shown some levels of psychological impact, from mild, moderate, and severe levels of psychological impact. And this kind of impact was pretty basically on the younger age, being female, and all the known kind of physical comorbidity that were there. And a lot of health concerns revolved around anxiety, worries, insomnia, especially amongst the youngsters. And so these were immediate kind of surveys that came about in 2020, when the lockdown happened. So these are kind of the nature of the psychological impact in the Indian community by itself. So when we talk about the impacts, basically in terms of how this has had impact on children, you could see a lot more. We have heard about the migrant workers in the papers right now.
Sorry for interrupting, Dr. Madhavi. Will you take another 3-4 minutes?
Yes. Sure. Yeah. I think I should be able to.
Yeah. Thank you.
In 4 minutes. Yeah. So therefore, you can see a lot more of the kids being at home, and this has had implications in terms of the children with disability, of how parents of children. I work in the area of disability, so I wanted to bring this very saliently to all of you as well, because children with disability need special services, and their special services not being used has caused an immense amount of compromise, basically, in terms of the outcomes for children with disability itself. So therefore, it's very important for us to use the social and behavioral science to support the COVID-19 pandemic, because it's about by inequalities that we have talked about. In many countries, there are kind of racial inequalities that it has brought about, the kind of certain populations being affected much more than other populations that have been affected, the kind of privileges, the intersectionality of groups, group cohesions that have happened, and group inequalities that have happened have shown up quite salient in this kind of scenario that we can talk about. And then there have been issues of individual and collective interest in terms of how most people handle this pandemic in a science. The kind of communication that has been happening has been immensely good, and where the scientific community has come across, and the kind of social context in terms of the norms, the inequality, the political polarization that we are talking about, and by and large, the kind of stress, coping, resilience factors that we have been able to bring about have largely been focused, and many papers in social and behavioral science have started to support the COVID-19 pandemic response. And these are some good papers that you can see on the APS website that actually talk about. And what do we learn from the psychological science itself? Kind of all of the research priorities need to be focused on groups, cohesion and conflicts. The working environment and working arrangements that we are constantly right now need to be actually making. And we need to also understand about children and families because of the kind of constraints this has imposed for children with families, and also children that it has implications on the children's mental health as well as the mental health of the families dealing with children. And the innovative educational practices that we are talking about, the transitions that we have made from an in-class setting to a virtual media that we are talking about, and the demands that it has on the educational practices. Psychological science basically has an immense research priority in being able to help the educators come with informed decisions about the best practices that need to come up in education. And the biggest, and what I have been always talking throughout, is also the mental health as a research priority that we talk about. along with it is the physical health and the nature of neurological implications this has had, because there are reports also about how brain has been one of the central organ that the virus could have could actually affect as well. There are some of the reports on people being affected with dementia, especially the older age group, but also some other neurological implications have also been there. So therefore, we need to understand how the virus has an implication on the physical health and also the neurological health status of the neurological systems. And very important and key is the interventions that are targeting on behavioral change model and how we are able to adhere to the kind of the prescriptive aspects of stay home, using the mask and washing the hands, all of these kind of prescriptions to curtail the spread of the rigorous behavior change. And this is a kind of a research priority that we need to learn from psychological science models that we can talk about. So these are kind of immediate research priorities to be able to address, and how psychological science can actually contribute to this area of work. And WHO has come out with a kind of very good toolkit for integration. UNICEF has brought about all of this, that they have, you'll see a lot of this that has been put up in their websites, the United Nations, the WHO, all of this. So we see a kind of expert recommendations on how we address the COVID-19 pandemic we talk about. So by and large, a very key aspect from psychological science is protecting your mental health during this virus outbreak, and the spread that it is happening is something that's very, very important. So in our lab, basically, apart from being able to do some of this work, we've come out with a kind of strengthening community health systems and participatory care and family participatory care as a kind of how do we strengthen the primary healthcare systems in being able to train the frontline workers to go into the community and help children improve their cognitive outcomes, because children at this time are the ones who just are the very vulnerable populations that we need to address immediately, especially parents of children from the low-income communities with very little resources and constraints of not being able to get access to many of the health systems. We need to train frontline workers so that these families need to be addressed. So this one of the programs that we are here. And I would like to thank Sudha, Dr. Sudha, who's been my colleague and friend from a long time, for giving this opportunity. And I would say remaining resilient during this pandemic is the key. And how do we build on this resilience process is again a factor from psychological science. And
thank you, Dr. Madhavilata. We have a few questions, and I think while Dr. Madhavilata recovers from her presentation, we will take these questions to Professor Rangarao. Professor Rangarao, are you able to hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Sonia Raju asks this question that India's Minimum Wage Act 1948 is a statutory act.
Yes.
We made a legal body to protect the interests of labor, especially during times of uncertainty.
Yes, in the 48 Minimum Wages Act, 48 is purpose of the act is to see that the employer should pay minimum wages to the workmen. It's okay. And the machinery is also provided in the act to see that the employers should pay the minimum wage to the workmen. It's fine. But during this crisis, the Epidemic Diseases Act gives a wide powers to the government to interfere with that also. So I think that machinery provided in the act is not concerned with this situation. Second thing is that because of this crisis, employees or the workmen is not able to go to the work. So when they are not attending the work, there is the question of payment of wages. That is my answer. But the question, straight away answer is that yes, machinery is provided under the Minimum Wage Act 1948 to see, to implement, to see that the employer should pay the minimum wage to the workmen.
But it cannot be enforced.
Now, because
Under
under the vast powers conferred by the Epidemic Diseases Act, state governments take action. Any action, the act contains only 4 sections, but it is a very important act which gives wide powers to the central government and state government to take any steps, any decisions to curb this crisis, to prevent this spreading of the diseases.
Okay.
Particularly under that act,
True. There's one more question. This is from MAITHRY Shinde. She asks, can there be any amendments to the labor laws relating to migrant laborers, and particularly when they are relocating themselves, and what kind of challenges does it pose in terms of law? Can there be amendments which are necessitated by the present situation?
Yes, very good question and very good question. But as for my knowledge goes, there is no amendments. Amendments are made during this period to meet the situation about the migrated labor. But there is a need. There is a need. And migrated labor comes to the different places under 2 situations. One is under the independent contractor. They will come. Contractor will bring them to the places, to the place where the work is available, and directly they will come on their own way, on their own. So without approaching any independent contractor. So situations are different. So as of now, I think government has not made any amendments to this Contract Labor Act or to see the problems of the migrated labor. But there's a need. Definitely, as Madam pointed out, there is a need to make amendments in the respective laws to see that the interest of this migrated labor to be protected, particularly situations like this, COVID-19. Yes.
There's one more question, sir. This is from Sudharani. Do we have any special citizen cells or citizen forums to safeguard the human concerns related to the pandemic?
So officially, as of all of us know, this is a general question, not related to the particularly labor law or law, but as all of us know that there are many private institutions, homes are there to look after this, but official from the government side, I think as far as my knowledge goes, there are no such homes.
Okay, sir. And if there are
but one thing is there, as all of us know that the government, state governments of different state governments are taking steps to establish some homes to give shelter, accommodation to the people who are affected by this COVID-19. That is there to make them quarantine and all that. There are certain steps are taken by the government during this period. But regular basis, I think no government has established any homes like that.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Rangar. Dr. Madhavilata, are you back?
I'm back, sir.
Okay. There are a few questions. One is that this is Haripriya who is asking, in what ways can the mental exhaustiveness that you spoke about of the youth, can we overcome that, and how can we rejuvenate the young minds?
Though it's something that rejuvenating or coming back, and what we have talked about in terms of the kind of psychological impacts in terms of mental exhaustion that the youngsters in the country today face because of the kind of immediate transition to the virtual media, and they're missing out on the campus life and many of these kind of things is the kind of, we need to look into it from the complexity of the situation by itself. Because just coming out with some very prescriptive approaches, please do stay optimistic, find ways to connect to your, there have been some of these that have been put out in terms of being able to your friends, try to stay safe, try to stay optimistic, be resilient at this time, and all of this have been kind of very prescriptive messages that have being given to the many youngsters, but we need to try to understand exactly from how the students essentially are able to manage and come out with kind of key solutions. It's not kind of something we would be able to put forth immediately until we have some kind of information that comes in. What are the kind of specific problems that these youngsters are facing due to this transition? Maybe we might come out with some kind of potential solutions to this.
A related question is from VNR VJIET admin.
Yes.
Do we have any, you mentioned, I think, the WHO and the UNICEF advisories,
yes.
But do we have any specific programs or let us say a module, from psychology perspective to cope with situations like that, which can go into the curriculum?
Have the advisory from the American Psychological Science, also from the UNICEF, which I can send some of this to be able to put it across and address the educational within the educational pedagogy.
And also, I was wondering whether when, at least even now, when the government is formulating different lock and unlock strategies, etc., whether any input is being taken from the psychology perspective. May I request all the participants to please switch off their mics?
The voice was breaking. Can you just say that again?
Yeah, I'll do that. May I request all the participants to please mute their mics and switch off their videos, please? Thank you. Okay. I was just wondering, Dr. Madhavilata, whether the psychological aspect of this pandemic is being factored in when the government is formulating either lock or the unlock policies that are being formulated now.
So can I just missed if you can?
Okay, you are not able to hear?
Hello?
Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you. The voice was breaking previously.
Okay.
I couldn't get it.
This is just a broad question about whether any psychological input is going into the formulation of the government's lock or unlock policies.
Some of it, there have been a kind of Symposium-Corona kind of researchers who have joined the DST and DBT report that being addressed by mental health. And some university part of this forum to be able to provide this kind of advisory to the government to address the mental health issues. Yes, sir.
And also, is there a, as a psychologist, are there any professional associations in India which are able to formulate a kind of advisory which could be given to the people? Do you have any Indian psychology advisor, association or something like that? Because I think what we are getting today is obviously from WhatsApp University. Every morning you get 100, advices about how to cope with this. But from a professional organization, from a professional association or a body of psychologists, is there something that you have been able to formulate?
The Indian body by itself, I think we need to meet up, but there is an Indian association, National Academy of Psychological Science in India, which is with the Center for Social and Behavioral Changes, behavioral change in the University of Allahabad, and a couple of people are part of this NAOP now. So if we go to the NAOP website, we will get some of this, but kind of publicly available mandate of advisory is not being provided by NAOP as such. But there've been discussion in terms of putting forth some kind of advisory like this.
Don't you think that there is a dire need for it now?
There is a kind of very urgent need for this one. Probably I can get in touch with them to just see if some kind of advisory board can be formed in terms of providing this kind of.
I think from this symposium you can I think take this request to the association or the body that there's a widely felt need to get it from experts, because in the absence of expert advice, we of course have to depend on quacks.
Yes, absolutely, yes.
So I think from our side you can take that message to the body.
Absolutely, I would be happy to do that.
There's one more question. I think these are two questions, Dr. D. Srinivas Rao and MAITHRY Shinde. Both of them are talking about, for example, how this pandemic has impacted the employment prospects or opportunities, or even the imagined prospects. And that has impacted the confidence levels of young people. So what can we do? What can you as psychologists can do to kind of bring back that confidence in the future? Because I think youth without the confidence in the future is a disaster. Youth who do not have a vision of the future is disaster. So how do we bring back that confidence in the future to the young people?
So this kind, like you had mentioned, absolutely, that this pandemic is going to pass. And right now we are in the stage of where the pandemic is happening. So therefore, because we are right now in the situation, I think the confidence levels of the youngsters who have been kind of unprepared with this kind of situation they are handling. So basically, human nature by itself, we are very resilient to what happens, right? We need to build on our resilience process that are there. So basically, it is to help the youngsters regain their confidence in being saying that this kind of situation is not an either or, nor it looks as bleak and ambiguous as it is. So the possibility of them being able to tolerate this kind of ambiguity at the moment is something that's bringing down on their confidence levels. It's something that when I talk constantly with my students, some of them had to defer their university admissions. They have had to compromise on many of the things that's there. So probably these are some of the things that these kids are not really prepared in the present times. So for them to make them prepared that there will be, that this situation is a kind of temporary situation at the moment that we need, and also to help them confidence will be also bringing their kind of optimism that things will regenerate back, but it was going to take time. That's something that through the support groups and as professionals and as teachers ourselves, I think we need to reiterate this to our students quite strongly, and probably that can help them. And of course, parents have an immense.
I think this morning when the chairman of the group was speaking about reopening strategies or restarting strategies, I think one of the important strategies should be to set up counseling centers in institutions that when the students come back to the campus once again, that they have some place where they can go and talk about their anxieties and their anxieties about the future, etc. So I think it's more than ever the need for counseling centers, because counseling centers so far have worked only as a kind of employment exchanges rather than psychological counseling. But now I think with employment more or less kind of disappearing, I think they need counseling more than employment opportunities. And I think one of the, because we are, every day I'm sure all of us are receiving tips about how to improve our physical immunity, our biological immunity. But I think what we need more than that is to develop psychological immunity, to withstand this crisis, not just biologically, but also psychologically. I think this is where professional organizations, professional bodies should step in and, kind of use the social media that is available and give us authentic information about how do we remain optimistic, how do we remain in a way involved in what is happening rather than become completely dissociated or depressed. And therefore, I think I think all of us as students of literature, or as students of psychology, or students of law, we all of us have a role to play, particularly during this pandemic, and not merely to see ourselves as that we should be able to see beyond the end of the tunnel and see what and how we are going to deal with the situation after this is over, because this obviously will be over, but how do we look into the future with some hope, some optimism, and even if things are very uncertain today, how do we remain optimistic? Because I think as it is said in the Bible, man shall not live only by bread. Human beings also live on ideas, and I think it is our responsibility to give ideas about the future, which will inspire a generation to remain focused, remain optimistic, and remain involved in the society and in the nation building process. So I think this is, I think overall the message that has emerged from this panel, that all of us have to, take this opportunity as a challenge and use this to rethink our own disciplines and how we can align our disciplines to give a vision of a better future for, particularly, I think if not for our generation, at least for the next generation. How do we give them an image of the future that is going to be better than what we already have today? So we are very happy that this panel has given us some direction, and it's sad that Dr. Sai Baba Reddy could not join us, but I suppose that has given the two panelists more time to elaborate on their ideas. And thank you, the audience, for some wonderful questions. And with this, I hand over the session back to the organizers.
So thank you, Vijay Kumar sir. Already we have implemented in our VNR VJIET, sir. Already we have appointed one counselor to look after all these things. And during this pandemic time, we are also conducting webinars, especially to motivate the students to see that to concentrate on only academics rather than in other activities. So that way, I think already we have initiated this counseling session in VNR VJIET, sir.
This is great, sir. Thank you. That's really good.
Yes. Over to Sudharani madam.
Hello.
Sudharani madam. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon. I hope, I don't know whether Varshitha is available or not. Otherwise, thank you all so very much. Thank you, Dr. Vijay Kumar sir. Thank you, Channakeshwar sir. Thank you, Dr. Madhavi. You were really wonderful. Thank you, Rangarao sir. You were really absolutely fine. And I'm sure this kind of congregations would happen more often. And this is what exactly we want. Citizen-centric ruling, citizen-centric policy making should be the norm of democracy. That's what I strongly believe in. Thank you all. And we will come back again at 2 o'clock, 2 p.m. So until then, bye-bye.
Maybe Sudha, you can also announce the 2 o'clock panel, the panelists, so that people will come back.
Okay. So at 2 p.m. we have a panel let me read out the right name. Don't want to go wrong. So it is from 2 to 4 again. Tomorrow again from 10 to 12, and then 2 to 4 p.m. That's how we planned. And this 2 to 4 p.m. panel consists of members. Just a minute, sir.
We
Should
have
I help you out, ma'am?
Dr. Aparna Sharma from Amity University.
Yes.
She's a historian.
Yeah.
And then we have economics, Dr. Matthew George, whom we heard briefly in the morning.
Yes.
And we have Dr. M. Kodandaram from a political science discipline, and Mr. Akram Feroz, who is a theater practitioner and activist who will speak on performing arts. So this is a panel at 2 o'clock, and on behalf of VNR VJIET, I thank you once again, everyone here, both the speakers as well as the audience, and hope to see you all back at 2 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you all.